Hello and welcome to the State of the Rivalry podcast, where we will record this time. I promise. I'm Casey Bartley, Boiler Upload. I'm joined by Dylan Sinn of the Journal Gazette. Dylan, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. I really do trust you to record this time. Last time we had a little bit of a snafu. We had a great podcast record. You guys will
So
never
good.
hear it,
So
but it was
good.
great. So you can trust us on that one, and you will get to hear this one. So congratulations on that.
Yeah. In fairness, it was like an hour on IU coaching staff search, which we will do now, and not
That's
much has changed since then. So it'll probably be pretty similar to the same conversation we had. Though first, let's start with the Big Ten regular season wrapped up. The winners, Michigan State Spartans, by a three games, I believe, again.
yeah. They ended up because they beat Michigan the last day of the season to get to the three games.
A convincing run through the top of the Big Ten to win it for Michigan State as well. By far the highlight of the season for anyone in the Big Ten. Like that was just an impressive show. I think they beat two, three, four, six, and seven or something like that in their final like 7 or 8 games. Just a dominating Tom Izzo team. And we, on the other hand, cover teams that are towards the middle of the Big Ten. Purdue ties for fourth. IU is ninth in the
Ninth,
conference.
all alone in ninth. That's right. 10-10. Very average.
Very average. Came on late pretty well. There was definitely a spot in the middle where it looked like they were going to be bottom feeders and out of the NCAA tournament. We talked a little bit before this call. Just IU looks to be on the right side of the bubble right now. I think we'll start there. Just a quick overview of tournament game tomorrow. They play at noon against Oregon. That's a must win, I assume, for IU if you want to feel confident about the tournament. Is that right, Dylan?
Yeah, that's kind of the way it seems. Like I if they lose tomorrow, I'd say it's still better than 50-50 that they would get in, but it would be like you're sweating out the rest of the week, right? You're going looking at a bunch of other teams and trying to figure out, okay, who do we need to lose to like not steal a bid, and we're sweating out Selection Sunday. If you win, you can just kind of throw all that to the side. We're in, we can kind of kick our feet up. Maybe go give Michigan State a run on Friday, but kick our feet up after that and feel better about yourself. And you also, if you win tomorrow, might maybe play yourself out of the first four and get maybe an 11 seed or even a 10, which I think Jerry Palm has them at a 10 right now. So actually a lot to play for IU going into this tournament.
There is something very satisfying about IU. The last time they made the tournament, they were the 11 seed, right?
They were a
Or was
four
it
2 years ago,
okay?
and then they were an 11 in the first four the year before that.
Year before that. All right, that's the one I'm thinking because it's very satisfying for such a traditionalist school to be in this made up gimmick of an NCAA tournament seed.
They played the first four in 2022. They played against Wyoming in
Mm,
Dayton. What a game that is!
powerhouse.
Two perennial powers duking it out. Jordan Geronimo had 15 points and 9 rebounds in that game. Remember Jordan Geronimo?
He ended up somewhere, right?
He is at Maryland. He is currently at
Maryland. Okay.
Maryland. He is actually a part of the rotation of one of the best teams in the Big Ten right now. I don't really think he's like doing a whole ton, but he is out there playing 15 minutes a game.
There's a reason why Maryland has the worst bench in the conference. But no, yeah, solid. I mean, at points during this season, an 11 seed would have seemed like a gift for this IU program. Well, I think we'll touch some of those struggles later when we talk coaching staff. Let's just look at I guess let's wrap up the IU season going into this tournament. Was it good? Was it bad?
It was interesting. Let's put it that
Okay.
way. I do think it looked like it was kind of spiraling out of control. They had those
Hmm.
back-to-back losses by 25 points in the middle of January, and it was like, all right, what are we doing here? What is the point of any of this, right? Are we just playing out the string? And to Indiana's credit, once it became clear that Mike Woodson was not coming back, and they kind of made that announcement, that was really the turning point. And since then, they played much, much better basketball. Not only have they won, I think, five of their last 8 games since that announcement, But only one of those losses has been by double digits. So they've played a bunch of good teams and they've played them close or won. And it's been some pretty impressive ball down the stretch. Like Trey Galloway being the point guard again has really kind of opened things up for them. He's just a good guy off the ball screen, can really create for them. And then Miles Rice being able to play off the ball, I think has opened up some of his playmaking ability. I think that's probably where they should have been all along. And then you throw in Anthony Leal being back in the starting lineup, which again, I think should have probably happened all along, but I understand why you give Cannon Carlisle the shot at the beginning of the year. He was the transfer, et cetera, and so forth. Anthony Leal is great, and having him is Indiana's best lineup. Combine that with Luke Goody finally finding his shot here late in the season, and you have four guys who are really, really good just about every time they step on the floor. In Rice, Leal, Galloway, Goody. That's the core of their lineup, and then you just have Ballo or Renew on top of that, and it's like, okay, this is a lineup we can work with. And they've kind of ridden that down the stretch here, and it's been pretty impressive to see some mental fortitude from a program that has kind of struggled with that over the years, to really say, hey, we could have packed this in many, many times this year. And at no point did they say, hey, we're done and we're playing out the string. I thought that was impressive.
Yeah, to put some context to that little stretch there, they lost to Iowa by 25 on the road,
Yep.
lost to Illinois at home by 25 points,
And
won
that
a
was the game where they
closely,
got the Illinois game is the one where they got booed off the floor. Like it
yeah.
was, they were down 30 in the first half. It was brutal.
And headed into that stretch, they were 13-3 and 4-1 in the conference. So like they're I, props to IU fans. Like you guys they will latch on to anything to feel good about them. Like they were feeling good going into that game. Get dog walked twice. They win an overtime game against Ohio State on the road. Still looking pretty good. At that point, IU's 14-5, 5-3 in the conference. And then just an onslaught of scheduling, really,
Yeah.
because you go to Northwestern, lose by 9. That was before, everyone on Northwestern was gone for the season.
Yeah.
Lose a close one at home to Maryland, lose a close one on the road at Purdue, lose not a very close one to Wisconsin on the road, and then Michigan at home. And those five straight knocks IU to 14-10, 5-8 in the conference, with a game headed up to East Lansing where it looked like, uh-oh, IU season's just going all the way out. Instead, IU pulls out this zone. I think what I it felt like they accidentally discovered through injury, some foul issues. It just seemed that Woodson had to be okay playing one big man at a time, despite Renew and Ballo being two of his best five players. And that seemed to really open things up to me, what I saw of IU in their offense working. And I think that allows you to play more Galloway. It allows you to do some more things without cramping things up inside. I think there's some blame in that because, you spent a lot of money to bring Umar Ballo onto the team, and all of a sudden, your starting five doesn't make any sense, and it's not your best five. But
Yeah.
IU, to their credit, beats Michigan State. Purdue handles business against Penn State, beats a Washington team on the road, and then in a really what looked like a whoever wins this has their foot in the NCAA tournament final game against Ohio State, holds on to win 66-60. None of those things I thought IU was capable of February 8th after losing that game to Michigan.
Not at all. And neither did I. And going to Michigan State, IU going to Michigan State and winning that game, I think is probably maybe the most surprising result in the Big Ten this year. It's got to be up there, considering what we know about both of those teams and the context of that moment for
Yeah.
IU when everything was falling apart, and Michigan State had played very well to that point and after that. So just going in there and getting that win, and the way they did it too, where Mike Woodson outcoached Tom Izzo flat out in that game because Indiana brought out that zone and Michigan State did not have a counter for it. It was really, really impressive work. And basically no one else has been able to do that the rest of the season. Michigan State has kind of run through the rest of the league with pretty significant ease here. So it was again, even in hindsight, pretty impressive.
Yeah. For a coach and program that they kind of quit. They announced they were going to quit. Mike Woodson was going to quit, was going to be done. Um, it seemed to spark some kind of life in the program. I don't know if like those things are related. Maybe it was just freeing not to have to worry or speculate. And whether it's, oh, good, we can just blame Woodson no matter what happens, good or bad, blah, blah, blah. Like something changed in that Michigan State game. They played aggressive. They played like a team that believed they could knock off what is now, a month later, clearly the best team in the conference. Uh, is that the last time Michigan State lost? I believe it is.
I
Yep.
believe it is, yeah. And I do think that there is something freeing about we know the situation with the coach. It's not hanging over everyone's head. And we can just kind of get down to business here and make it one last ride for everyone, right? It's like the scene in Major League. Well, what is there left to do? Win the whole thing, right? And so that's kind of where Indiana has been the last couple of weeks. I mean, Trey Galloway said that straight out. It's like, all right, this is our last ride here. Everyone
Right,
knows it. Let's go out there and win one, and not necessarily winning for Woodson, winning with Woodson, right? Like
right.
he's the coach and he's led us here, and let's make it one last one with him at the helm.
It's a pretty Hoosier storyline. Like,
It is. It really is. And then the coaching search happening in the background. It really has been a wild, wild back half of the
and yeah,
season.
don't worry. We are saving the coaching search for the end.
That's right.
There are thoughts, there are names. Like we'll definitely get into it. Probably way longer than we should, but it is a fascinating, fascinating circus that's already. We should be prepared for it since it's happened like three times in the last decade, but it's always new and fresh every time. Maybe the only thing about IU that's fresh. Switching over to Purdue, the other team you cover, the team I cover, the team who also had a losing streak that looked a little bit spiral like. Purdue's four-game losing streak, Michigan, Wisconsin, Michigan State, IU at IU, knocked them out of contention to what would have been their third straight Big Ten title, knocked them out of, going into that Michigan game, I believe they were like 10 and 11 in their last. Yeah, they were 11 and 1 in their previous 12 games.
Yeah.
A lot of
19 and
talk
5
about,
overall.
yeah, a lot of talk about how they were prepared to be a two seed again. A lot has changed since then. We talked to Mac Painter today before practice. First of all, he did it under protest because we didn't know the opponent who to ask about. So he's like, "Why are we doing this? There's no previewing who we're playing." Fair enough, but he said pretty much their stake going into the Big Ten is, look, there's no way we can fall off a six seed. It's more than likely we're at least a five seed. A win or a respectable showing, and we're probably a four seed. And the best we can probably hope for is maybe a dream scenario of a three seed if we went out, which is an accurate indication of Purdue is pretty locked in between, I think, four and five seed. To me
Yeah.
personally, I think there's enough good wins in this Big Ten tournament that it could pay major dividends for where they would play in the Sweet 16. The way I'm looking at things, the way I see it set up, but I don't think it's going to change much in terms of seeding. I don't think they're going to bounce around a whole bunch. Just, I guess we'll start with the season. And this is something on the old Gold show with Ledman last night that we had a big conversation about, and I'll get your opinion. Was this a disappointing season for Purdue?
I don't think so. First of all, because it's not done yet, right? And I do think,
Correct.
and
That was my
Trey
answer.
Trakoff and Ren said this today. It's like they think this team has a lot in them.
Yeah.
They are not saying just because we lost 5 of 7 to end the regular season that we are not going to be able to accomplish our goals in the postseason. I think they're actually playing pretty well right now. The wins against UCLA and Rutgers were really nice. They were, I think, the better team in the game against Illinois. They just didn't make enough shots to win it, but they executed their game plan better, I thought, on the road against a very good team. And so it's one of those things where you feel pretty good heading into the postseason. I think they've kind of washed away a lot of the losing streak. They're still not great defensively, but I think they're good enough on most nights to win a lot of games, I
Right.
think. And so I would not be surprised if they made a second weekend this season. And if that is the case, then yeah, absolutely, the season's a success because this is not. I said this at the beginning of the season. This is think of this as a 2 year journey with this group, right? Because you have almost everyone back next year, including especially the big three with Braden, Trey, and Fletcher, right? So you have 2 years to figure out how to maximize this specific group. We're essentially only at the halfway point, and they're already a very, very good team.
Yeah. I think the one counter to does it feel disappointing is I think the record feels a little disappointing just because Purdue has two of the best three players in the conference. I think Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman have both earned that honor. I think Kaufman continues to be just really, really undervalued for how good he's been offensively, the things he does. Granted, there are a lot of defensive deficiencies with him, but I don't think generally most people are smart enough to even be aware of that. But also, just he does so much down low and his ability to create and move and score from all over. I think he's been phenomenal. And I think when you have two of the three best players in the conference, you want to be at the top.
It's the way they lost some of those games too.
Yeah.
It's that they were playing well enough to win, and then at some point in the second half, the switch flipped off,
Yeah.
and it was like, all right, what went wrong here, right? And it was the same pattern over several games in a row. And I think Matt Painter's kind of talked about that is they need 40 minutes, and that's going to be the
Yeah.
story of this postseason for them is can you put together 40-minute games in a do or die situation? And they seem to think they can, but we have to see it on the court.
Yeah. I think it's going to be one of those, a few years ago, Fairleigh Dickinson coach, talks about how confident he was and how they felt good. No one's going to feel good when they get Trey Kaufman and Braden Smith in their bracket. You don't want to play that.
Like, and that's the thing. It's Purdue may lose in the second round or the Sweet 16 or whatever it is. No one is going to want to see that. Like, it's not one of those things where they are a higher seed that is ripe for an upset. No one's going to be picking
Right.
them to lose to whatever 13 seed they play in the first round, right?
Unless
So
it's Will Wade.
unless it's Will Wade, that's true. We're going to talk about Will Wade. It is one of those.
Oh.
It is one of those things where I do think that the combination of just Braden and Trey gives you such a high floor
Yep.
of where you're going to be on any given night. Basically, the only time in the Big Ten season those guys didn't deliver on a given night was the Penn State game way back in December. Maybe that was the most shocking result of the Big Ten season looking back
That
on
was
it.
going to be my retort. At the time, it didn't seem as bad because we were all under the impression, well, Penn State must be good.
Yeah,
But like certainly looking back, neither of them were great against Michigan State.
that's
Or
true
no,
too.
they weren't great against IU either.
Well, they weren't great against IU. They were good in the first. It was one
IU's
of
the
those
game I'm
ones.
thinking of. Yeah, Trey
Yeah,
and Braden were bad.
Trey had 9 and Braden had like
Eight.
5 points and 6 assists or whatever it was. It was not good. But they were both good in the first half. It was weird how quickly that game flipped, and I'm still confused by exactly what happened at halftime there. But yeah,
Yeah.
basically those two guys give you such a floor because they have so much they can do. And if you're hitting any threes at all, you're going to be in any game you play, basically.
So let's look at their Big Ten tournament run just a little bit to see what right now USC and Rutgers just tipped off. Dylan Harper just airballed a mid-range jumper, which is about a perfect metaphor for everything they've done this season. Purdue gets the winner of those two. Waiting for the winner of that game is Michigan. What if you're Matt Painter, if you're in that locker room, what is your honest appraisal of like what they want and what they need to do for this tournament? Because last year, I think anyone that was around the team like knew they're going to go up to Minnesota. They're going to play. They're not going to throw away the game. They don't give a damn. They didn't need that trophy. They didn't want to play 3 games in a row. Braden Smith tweaks his knee or ankle in that Wisconsin game, and they said, "Can we get away from here?" They
It
didn't
was,
care at all.
it was the end of a really long season, and they were ready for the
Yep.
116 game and the
Yep.
redemption. I do think I want to see them. I think they're going to win pretty easily tomorrow. Spoiler alert, whoever they play, neither of those teams is on their level. I want to see them beat Michigan. I think it would be good for them to go into the tournament with at least one win over a top of the table team in the Big Ten, just to kind of as an appetizer, right? Because they haven't had one of those in a little bit here. They lost to Michigan the last time they played them. They lost to Michigan State, Wisconsin. They lost to Illinois. UCLA is pretty good, but you want one of those real big names on there before you go into the tournament. So if you get to the semifinal, I think you feel fine about where you are. That probably cements you as a 4 seed as well.
Yeah, I'm in the same way, especially because I think Purdue matches up against Michigan really well. Even the loss at Michigan, you take 18 less free throws or whatever it was. Both your big guys get fouled out, and you still only lose by two. I think they feel like they outplayed them in Ann Arbor. A second win that series. And then, like you said, I think that wraps up the 4 seed. It cements Michigan as free falling, just which is like added fun.
Yeah, I
Added,
do. I do think it's interesting because Michigan might fall if they lose that first one. They're on like a 3 or 4 line right now. They could fall
they
to a
might.
5 if it looks a little rough. And that goes back to what Matt Painter said today, which I thought was interesting, which is the selection committee is going to have a tough time keeping these Big Ten teams out of 4 or 5
Yeah,
matchups because there's a lot of Big Ten teams that are right on that 4 or 5 line with Wisconsin and Michigan and Purdue and Maryland. All 4 of those teams could
Oregon,
be a 4 or 5. Yeah, Oregon right there too.
UCLA.
UCLA, yeah, like they're gonna have it. Like you're not. They don't want to have these teams match up in the second round. You're supposed to have it wait to the Sweet 16 at least, but it's going to be a tough road to do that just mathematically because there's so many teams in that area. So I find that fascinating too.
Yeah, I'll find that interesting. Do they kind of, I think might happen is Purdue gets pushed down a seed, but instead they get put in the Indy bracket. So
Yeah,
they can be a 5 seed, but they get to go to Indianapolis. Is
wouldn't
that
that be nice?
fair compromise? Or IU, well, IU's not a 5 or 6, so
Yeah, I think Purdue would take that. I don't think Matt Painter cares about the difference between a four
yeah.
or five and a six, and then going to a different getting to play in Indianapolis. I think they would take that in a heartbeat. Because then if you are a 4, a 5, or a 6 in that case, then you're playing a better team, but you have the home court advantage essentially. Like it was loud in there when they played Texas A&M back in December. When they played Arizona last year, it was loud in there. So I think they would welcome that.
Yeah. Purdue fans travel, particularly when it's only 60 miles down I-65.
I would also enjoy that as someone who covers the team. I
Right.
would like to not have to get on a plane and fly somewhere.
Yeah, that was the hurtful part of when the win streak like went away because it was like, oh my God, they're gonna just get Milwaukee and Indy and it's gonna be so easy and like it's gonna be another tournament of close games. And now I'm talking to Foreman about like, oh well, when we get put in Seattle, I'm like, what? I don't want to go to Seattle. It's, it's so far away. It just got warm here. Why are we leaving?
My paper used a lot of its travel budget sending me to the college football playoff with Notre Dame. Like, hey,
Yeah,
we need to get you guys closer here, please.
yeah. Let's be a little local, a little local. Um, yeah. So do you agree? Do you have any, give you a little chance, do you have any qualms about the all Big Ten teams, player of the year, anything going on in that world?
You know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say that Anthony Leal got snubbed from all defense. I know. I like it is one of those things where he
Mr.
did.
Nutkicker got person of the year in the Big Ten, so like he's fine.
He is you could make an argument for him as defensive player of the year in the Big Ten. I would not have voted for him to win that just because he didn't play for half the season. Again, that's not his fault.
So who
That's
are you taking
the team.
off?
That's a good question. Probably one of the Oregon guys. Oregon was like they're the 8 seed in the Big Ten, and somehow they got 2 guys on all defense. I don't know about that one, right?
Was it
Their
Bamba
defense,
and Biddle? Am I
yeah,
remembering that correctly?
I believe
Bamba's the best single defender in the conference.
then take Biddle off, I guess, because
He's the
like
best rim protector.
but like I mean I don't know when I watched them play IU and Purdue, I was not super impressed with like oh this team just defends the hell out of the ball, you know. Not to the extent of like 2 of these guys need to be among the 5 best defenders in the conference. Um, And so like Leo has been an absolute terror on that end of the floor late in the season here. It's really fun to watch him, quite frankly, because he really does a good job of just straight up staying in front of his guy, whoever it is. And it's one of those things that just sounds so simple, but he is never beaten off the dribble. He's really good at recovering, and then he's also just really good at sticking his hand in and poking the ball away when it's not really his guy. It's just a guy driving to the rim. He just sticks his hand in there. He's got really good hands. It's fun to watch. And so I would have put him on all defense. I know that's kind of tilting at windmills at this point, but that was the thing that stuck out to me. Good for Braden for winning Player of the Year, of course.
That's just gross, gross stuff. I don't know why Golden's on the first team. That's my biff.
Yeah, it's one of those things. If you're doing it by center, who should the center be, right? Like if you're saying that Kaufman Wren is a power forward, who is a better center in this league than Golden? Would you put Biddle on there instead?
I like Biddle more.
Okay.
That could definitely be a personality thing because I watch Golden play, and to watch a 7 foot 250 guy act like he's Fletcher Lawyer, like I'm not
I,
here
I,
for it.
that does rub me the wrong way. I'll get
Yeah, you're the one that like I think opened up my eyes to this.
yeah.
I talked to you about something, you're like, I'm the wrong person to talk to. This guy is I don't know.
And then once you
Um,
see it, he does it all the time.
yeah,
Trust me.
it's constant. I don't know. He's like fine. But, like he's not great at anything.
His numbers are better than he is, I think. If you watch that team, he is not one of their like most important players, I don't feel like. It's Wolf and it's Donaldson are really running the show there, and then Golden is getting a lot of he's the beneficiary of a lot of playmaking from those two, I think.
I mean, I'm not gonna go that far because I think Michigan's guards are hot garbage, and the only reason they're good is because of Golden and Wolf. But even with Wolf's struggles late, I still feel like he's the better big on that team and more important. But that's just me quibbling. I it's if you're gonna if you it looks like you've made an exception for someone like crazy good when you go to 6 players on the team. And
Yeah.
that's not what it feels like when the name next to it is Golden. That's my issue. But
Uh,
oh well, besides that, good job. Made Braden Smith player of the year. Well deserved.
I guess let me ask you this as
Mhm.
someone who has followed this all year. Obviously, I have too, but I want your opinion. Would you have picked Braden over Trey? Was Braden the right choice for of the Purdue guys?
Yeah. I thought it was a lot closer than I think any narrative was.
Mhm.
Um I think there were absolute stretches. There were stretches when Purdue wasn't winning that Trey was carrying them more, and I'm not sure what to do with that.
Mhm.
Because like he held some games close, but like if Braden played well, Purdue won.
Yeah.
So
It,
it's
I have no my personal beliefs. I have no problem with Braden winning. I
yeah.
think that he did a good job. It's not only the scoring, but it's obviously the setting up too.
Mhm.
And obviously, honestly, the rebounding too. He is a
His
really good
defense
rebounder. Yeah.
in general, yeah.
When they won 11 to 12 games in January, early February, Braden's defense was a huge part of it. Like
Yeah.
there was that stretch where he was just getting in every single passing lane. And to me, that was enough to put him over the top just because, as you talked about earlier, Trey is not a great defender. He's not terrible, but he's not great either. And so it is one of those things where I think that Braden all around deserves it. But I think you could make a case for Trey,
Yeah.
considering, especially late in the season, when he scored 22 or more points in 7 of the last 8 games or something like that is really, really impressive for him.
Yeah, just uber efficiency for the way that he scores is crazy. Like him shooting his 61% as a big man inside is not the same as what most big men like
Yeah.
inside numbers are. 17% assist rate, only turning the ball over 15% of the time for how often he is moving around and dribbling like to be able to play make in that way. I there's times when I watch him and he's Draymond Green, but he can score
That,
on the
that,
offensive
t-
end.
yeah,
Offensive
yeah,
end.
yes, yeah, absolutely.
Offensive.
That,
No
that,
Draymond Green on defense. There's not an ounce of Draymond Green in his defense. There's not I think he actually is a good switcher on the perimeter. But
Yeah.
no Draymond Green on defense. Offensively, the way he plays on the short roll, like he's like Draymond Green if Draymond Green was dangerous with the ball in his hand,
Yeah.
besides just passing.
It is basically a lot of what the Warriors, again, we're talking about the Warriors here, but their offense is a lot of what the Warriors like to do, which is just get a 4-on-3,
Yep.
right? With Trey at the ball, at the free throw line, right? And
Yep.
figure it out from there. That's
And
what they
there's
want to
not
do.
many bigs that can make that kind of quick decision making.
No, he's been really good at that the whole year. I mean, look, that 10-foot push shot that he takes and makes like 7 out of 10 of them, it is a really important shot for this Purdue. The fact that that shot he can make is really important for this Purdue offense because otherwise they're gonna come out at him and he is not, or they're gonna sag back and he's not gonna be able to make those decisions.
Why do we call it a push shot just because he's big? Can't it just be a floater? It's a floater.
It's because
It
it comes
sounds
from
so disrespectful to call it a push shot.
because
Like
it's
this guy out
basically a
here
set
taking
shot.
granny free throws. That's what it sounds like.
To me a floater is off the dribble and he's usually not dribbling, he just catches it and kind of goes like just he pushes it like it's basically an old school set shot from like 1953.
It's disrespect towards big men. It's and I won't take it. I won't have it.
This is a guard's world, we're all just living in it, man.
Yeah. I would say if Trey was either a notch or two better on defense, or maybe more importantly, if he was a better rebounder defensively, I think it gets real even with Braden. But the fact that I'm going to look it up right now. Trey's defensive rebounding percentage is 14.9 and Braden's is 14.7.
That's a wild stat, by the way.
Yeah, you like which Braden's always rebounded really well for his size,
Yeah,
but like Braden's coming out from the perimeter like you got to be better. Also, Braden's turnover rate is down to 18.2%.
he's just really efficient. I mean, for Trey, it's crazy because there are times where I see him dominate the glass. I'm like, why don't you do this all the time?
Yeah.
There are times where he is just a terror on there. It's like no one is getting that ball because he's going up there and he's going to find a way to get it. And then there are just times where you just don't really notice him in rebounding for long stretches. And I don't really know. I don't think it's that he's not trying or he has an on-off switch or anything like that because that guy, his effort is so high level all the time. But I don't really know what to do with the inconsistency in the rebounding. I think that that's something that if there's an area for him to get better this
Right.
offseason, I think that's it. And I think if he comes back and is a 29 guy next year, you're talking maybe a Big Ten player of the year next season.
Yeah, it's defensive rebounding and it's defensive positioning. That Michigan State game was just a I I've heard from some sources that the coaching staff were just constantly bewildered by where he was on the court. And they didn't understand why it kept happening. And that's like, is it mental focus? Is it fatigue? It's like a little bit of all those things, right? But like you just have to sharpen that up. And to be fair, he's never been asked to be an anchor of a defense before. And he's never been asked to be an offensive anchor before either, but like that's his game. Like
They well,
that's
he spent an entire offseason preparing to be an offensive anchor. He didn't spend an entire offseason preparing to be a defensive anchor, and he won't be a defensive anchor next year, fingers crossed, on Daniel Jacobson's leg being healed. So
yeah,
it came out of nowhere, and it's like, all right, this is not what I planned for. And I think that is kind of that again, Matt Painter did a fantastic job this year of getting Purdue to where they are, not only without Edie, because that was a huge loss, obviously, but without Jacobson. Huge deal that they lost Jacobson, the heir apparent, in the second game of the season, and kind of played through it. That's really impressive. And that's why some of the stuff with the defense is like, yeah, it stinks that they're not better at defense, but also how good do you expect them to be when the guy who they thought was going to be their defensive anchor was lost 2 games into the season?
yeah, it's a combination of, and like even Cannon Catchings, who was supposed to be on this team. This team was designed to have Cannon Catchings and Daniel Jacobson. Catchings is a 6'6" wing that is long as hell and like projects to be a plus defender and a really good shooter. and a really good rebounder for his position. Like he was on the team up until the freshmen moved into their apartments. There was there was no time to replace it. And then the other thing, because there's this talk of like, why isn't there another big man on the roster? And that focuses on more like, so what you're saying is, why is Will Berg the emergency option? Not even emergency option. Like he started the
Yeah.
season over
I did
Jacobson.
I did think that was interesting as they tried Wilberg in the starting lineup when Jacobson got hurt and just realized so fast that that wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
And Wilberg tries, God love him, but he is just not a guy who's going to play 25 minutes for you.
Yeah. And it's kind of that's the other edge of the sword where you want to compliment Painter and say, I love the way he runs this program and everything else. You don't get to say that and then complain about Wilberg being an option because Wilberg put 3 years into Purdue. There's he was at every practice. He went through like Painter said this early in the summer, and it caught my ear then. He was like, we have to give him a chance because they've not seen him on the court. Like you
Yep.
could say, like, I've never been that impressed with him. I didn't think he had good hands, didn't seem like he had great positioning or awareness where to be. That's fine. But just seeing that and like if you were like to cut someone after 3 years just because of that without them getting an opportunity, that's not culture.
No.
Like that's
But
not
a lot of programs would have done that. Purdue prides
correct.
itself on not being one of those programs.
Correct.
Like that's the whole point of the culture Painter has tried to build, right? And I keep going back to that quote that he had. It was either the Elite Eight or the Final Four last year, where he said, "I don't know how long I'm going to be able to do it this way. It's probably going to catch up to me at some point." There is an argument to be made that it caught up to him, quote unquote, to a certain extent this season,
Right.
right? With the fact that Berg is the emergency is the backup option now at center, and quite frankly, in the middle of the season, the fact they didn't have a Lance Jones type transfer on this team to really be a third guard, right? CJ Cox is there now, good for him, but it's
I've got a guard take if you want to, but
okay.
go
Like
ahead.
he's there now. Like in the long run, it will be better they didn't get someone in the portal, but they would have won some games in the middle of the season, I think, with a more veteran guard in there. If you understand what I'm saying, it's a really thin line. That's why Painter does what he does because in the long run, it's probably going to be better for their development. You can even make the case that not getting Nigel Pack a couple of years ago was better for Braden's development in the long run
Correct.
than the games they would have won that year just by having Pack. Right? It's a really thin line, and Painter wants to err on this side of the line with long-term player development, and it's obviously worked. But there are obviously downsides to that, as there are to any roster building situation.
Yeah, I just don't think at any point this season I felt like the third guard was the issue. I felt like Fletcher Lawyer's defense was the issue. Felt like Braden Smith's defense was the issue. Felt like Trey Kaufman Wren's defense was the issue. I have not once felt like CJ Cox is not a starter worthy guard. Someone who takes nothing off the table because he's a good shooter and he's a really good defender and he doesn't turn the ball over. Purdue doesn't need, there is all this memory of years and years of Purdue offense struggling and grinding to a halt. And part of that is because they've played through the post so much that when it doesn't work in the post, it looks really bad. And like when you play like Fairleigh Dickinson and they're able to get away with every bit of contact, it's really hard to play as the other team, especially when you don't have great one-on-one guys, great two-on-one guys. Matt Painter, he said the Illinois game, which I think is a perfect example of this. Their three guys took 49 shots, I think, in the whole game. And he said
Yeah,
47 of them were good shots. That's insane.
yeah,
Purdue doesn't need a fourth guy shooting. They need someone capable of shooting because you want to
yeah.
stretch the floor. They don't need another shot creator. They have two of the best decision makers in the country, and Fletcher Lawyer as a third is pretty damn good. I've never thought like Jakari wasn't good at at the beginning of the season, and like that was problematic, and he was starting, so it was hurting them. But I think as soon as CJ Cox moved into the lineup, I I haven't seen one issue, one loss that was based off guard play.
I think
Team
that I
overall
think
defense, yes.
yeah, I think that's fair enough. I There are some games where I thought, okay, CJ is struggling shooting the ball a little bit, and Miles Colvin is struggling shooting the ball a little bit. Where is a guy who can hit some threes for you? But the problem, I guess, the rebuttal to that is that they won most of those games anyway because
Right.
that was when they were playing really good defense in late January and early February.
Yeah.
So like they were able, again, good on Painter, they were able to kind of weather those couple of games where it could have been a problem. It never turned into a problem, and now you have CJ Cox, probably a 4-year starter of Purdue.
Yeah,
Like
I'm
it's
like the idea of like Jakari and CJ just being able to take over from day one once Braden and Fletcher leave, like what
they're going to hand the program to them and Jacobson in 26, 27 and
that's
feel pretty
insane.
good about that, I think. Yeah.
That's insane. CJ Cox, freshman year, 30 of 77 for 39% shooting from three. Even Jakari Harris's numbers ends up at 19 and 61, 31%. Considering Jakari Harris was, I think, like 2 for 40 to start the season.
He was rough and he figured it out in the
Yeah.
Big Ten.
In conference play, Jakari Harris was 15 of 36, 42% from three in Big Ten play.
And it felt like all of the ones he made were big ones too.
Big ones.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I just don't feel like were they perfect? No. Were there some issues early? Absolutely. But I just think to think that this I think it's tough when you do specific players because like Lance Jones was awesome,
He really was.
but like all Big Ten awesome. So like I sure if you throw an all Big Ten guard on any team in the conference, they're better, probably 2 wins better.
Sure.
But I don't think it was like a lacking thing. I think defense and rim protection is just the answer. I think sometimes when you go through a long stretch of games, you don't want to say the same thing over and again. But like that 4 game losing streak and the struggles before, it's like, well, teams are shooting 93% from inside the paint. So like Wisconsin went what 20 of 22 from inside two,
20 of 22
inside
from
two.
2 point range.
It's a
That's
lot of real estate. It's a lot of space. So like it's just that, and like I don't. Some of that is penetration, but like Fletcher wasn't a better defender last year. Braden
no,
wasn't a better defender last year. Miles wasn't a good defender at all last year, and like he's a good one now. Like
no.
I don't think the perimeter D is honestly all that worse, if worse at all, than last year. It's just you don't have Zach Edey, you don't have like a wall.
I will say that there are going to be stories written in the first like month of next season, would be my guess. I might write one of them, which is, boy, they're a lot better on the perimeter defensively than they were last year. Wonder why that is. And so that's
Also,
important
like
to remember that.
Trey Compton and Braden Smith are playing these 4-on-3s with Caleb First on the floor. If you throw a 7'4" guy that can stretch the floor next to it,
Yeah.
like you're not just adding on like yeah, defense is gonna be way better. The offense is gonna be better too.
Yeah. It's good.
And
I feel like there's going to be a lot of Trey to Jacobson lobs next year.
yes,
Like that seems to be a play
100%.
that
Yeah.
we're not seeing that much this year, but we might see next year because Caleb, for as good as he is at so many different things, is not a lob finisher. That's why it was so funny that Braden's record-breaking assist was a Caleb lob in transition. But it is one,
That
or it
wasn't
was,
his that
it
wasn't
was
his
his
record breaking. It
it
was
was his
Miles.
700th. It was his 700th
Okay.
assist
Yeah.
was the lob to Caleb in transition.
Yeah. Miles
But
Colvin. For those about to play trivia in 20 years, it was Miles Colvin who caught the pass, who took a dribble and hit a little mid-range for the
hey,
record.
good call, good memory.
Well, that all circles around Purdue's culture, something built by Matt Painter. So let's go ahead and turn
Next IU coach, Matt Painter.
our eyesight. Oh God.
Does Matt Painter
Mm.
put this on the chyron at the bottom for this segment? Does Matt Painter want to throw away 20 years of goodwill at his school set it on fire to coach Indiana.
Does
That's
IU
best.
need Matt Painter more, or does Matt Painter need IU more?
Look, many are asking the question.
Okay, so no Matt Painter.
Sure.
No Matt Painter. We also know, as we have to do every time, no Brad Stevens.
No Brad Stevens. Sounds like.
Who
Um,
else have we crossed? I believe I saw like 4 or 5 names the other day,
we've
all
crossed
crossed.
off Dusty May.
Okay.
Seems like we've crossed off Scott Drew
Okay.
and probably TJ Otzelberg. Goodman says Jeff Goodman, Field of 68 says they have crossed off TJ Otzelberger, who Goodman said that was the one they should hire. So he seems to be pretty plugged in with that situation in particular. TJ Otzelberger, Iowa State. That was the guy that I wanted from the beginning. I thought that was the best they could realistically do. Seems like he's sticking around. He has Iowa State ties. It was always going to be tough to get him out of there. It will be a tough pill to swallow if Bill Self retires next year and suddenly TJ Otzelberger is the coach of Kansas. I think a lot of IU fans be pretty unhappy about that, but it is one of those things where,
Your
well,
IU
IU has been,
fans, they do know like Kansas is here, IU's
yes,
here.
it's one of those things where I've been using the term I've been using for Indiana is quasi blue blood, right? They're not Kentucky. The four big ones are Kentucky, Kansas, Carolina, Duke, right? I think those are your big four in college basketball. And then everyone else is a level below. Indiana's a level below. Louisville, UCLA, I think at this point, despite the fact they've won more titles than anyone, is in that level. So I think that yes, Indiana is a lower level job than Kansas. You can clip that. I do think it is a good job, however. I have heard some contrarian takes on that about how Indiana is not a good job and no one would leave for Indiana. I think that's incorrect. They are a team that has an extremely passionate fan base, which, despite what you may have heard, is generally speaking a good thing. Um, they have
Correct.
elite NIL resources and not only and they have talent in the area. I think that is something that gets missed a lot is that there are a lot of good basketball players in your backyard even still. Now Indiana has
Yeah, they
pretensions
keep
to
going to Purdue.
yes, well, I think there are a lot of coaches
Also
who
Notre
Scott
Dame.
Dolson, yeah. Scott Dolson is probably talking to several coaches who think, well, why can't I out recruit Matt Painter? I bet I could do that. And we'll see. I am not convinced it's going to be that easy, but I think there are a lot of coaches who think they can do that, and would at least give it a shot. And I do think that Indiana has pretensions to recruiting nationally, and I think they should. I think that that is their superpower vis-a-vis Purdue. Is yeah, Purdue's going to get a lot of guys from in-state, and
Mhm.
IU's going to get its fair share. Purdue is not going to get a Khalil Ware, I don't think. And so I think that that is Indiana's superpower and that they can embrace that while also getting guys to stick around at home. And I think there are coaches who would do that. So I think that Indiana is a good job. I think it is the best job open this cycle. I think is the way we should probably put it. I would if I was a basketball coach, I would rather be at Indiana than at Virginia or at NC State. You could if
North
Villanova,
Carolina is really nice. Like
it
living
is.
in North Carolina is very nice.
That's true. That's true. But I think that North Carolina State has a pretty passionate fan base too, with even fewer accomplishments than IU in recent years. Now they went to the Final Four last year.
Hold
I,
on, Dylan. Dylan.
that was a pretty
Dylan.
mediocre team that made a run,
Dylan.
as evidenced by the fact that
I didn't see any IU shirts in Phoenix.
despite the fact they went to the Final Four, they ran their coach out 6 months later.
That's a
I
big
don't.
despite the fact.
I know. But if I were a basketball coach, and granted I am biased, if I were a basketball coach, I would rather be the coach of Indiana than at NC State or Virginia. You might be able to talk me into Villanova over IU. That one's not open yet. Everyone seems to think it will open. I don't know about that. I think I'd still rather be at IU in the conference that's going to pay me a lot of money, rather than the Big East, which is not nearly that same level. So I do think that that's just as a baseline. IU generally thumbs up on how good the job is. Coaches, Your guess is as good as mine. I think that the number one thing with this search, it was the same with the IU football search, which no one paid attention to because who cares about IU football
I
until they
paid
hired Chris.
attention long enough to mock it,
There was
and I was
nothing
wrong.
there. Like that's the thing. There was nothing going on in that search for weeks, right? Like I mean, I shouldn't say weeks. It wasn't that long. It was like a week, but there were some names thrown out from the national guys. Your Pete Thamel, your Ross's Dellinger, that kind of thing. But none of them were correct. No one had Smitty to Indiana. Scott Dolson has apparently learned since he did the Mike Woodson search, and there were some every twist and turn was out in public. Basically, you saw their failed pursuit of their failed offer to Stevens. You saw their failed pursuit of Chris Holtman. He has learned to play things close to the vest and gotten pretty good at it. It seems
Is
because
that why he presumably pressured Woodson into making his decision to step away public
I
early?
I would not be surprised if that were the case. I think it was also one of those things where it was going to be a pretty toxic environment in Assembly Hall at that point because this was pre IU late season
Yeah.
resurgence. The Illinois game was bad enough where things that people were walking out, there were loud boos, it was rough. The team was just not the team was cracking under the weight of the coaching uncertainty, I think. And so giving them that clarity helped the current team. And then I think it also probably helped the coaching search. It does help that Indiana was essentially first to market, right? They've been able to kind of run this search before a lot of other openings were even available, right? So they were able to do some background early on. I think that helps to some extent. But I think that Dolson has done a really good job of being quiet with this one. Like we haven't even seen lists of from like the national guys. Like Jeff Borzello hasn't tweeted out, here's 5 or 6 names that you might want to be looking for. Right. We haven't even seen that, which is pretty
There are
impressive.
some names.
There are
If we'd like
names
to go over them.
There are names floating in the ether, but I haven't really seen anything definitive on these are the guys they've called. It's going to be one of these 7, that kind of thing.
Maybe
Goodman
not
came
contacted.
out. Yes. Goodman came out today and said he thinks it's going to be one of Brad Brownell at Clemson or McCollum at Drake. I don't know if I believe it, quite frankly. And I'm not saying that Goodman is wrong per se. I think it might. I'm sure someone told him that. I just don't know that anyone that you can really make that declaration yet. I think I will say this: Brad Brownell is a good basketball coach. People have gotten over their skis with this, and like basically, there have been a lot of IU fans who just are flat no on Brad Brownell. I don't really understand that. Clemson went to the Elite Eight last year, and they're in the top 10 right now. I think that'd be a pretty good hire. I understand it took him a while to get it going there, but I think IU should be basically privileging success in the portal era, right? And Brownell's best success has come since the portal started, since NIL became a thing. So I think that is a mark in his favor, pretty significant. So McCollum, I'm uncertain about that one. That there is a lot of Archie Miller PTSD going on there, where it's they want to be Virginia. That's the system that McCollum runs. They want to play very, very slow and methodical and grind you into dust. And he's really, really good at what he does. But he's been a coach in Division I for 1 season.
33.
They are really, really, really good. And that is a really, really, really short resume.
Slowest team in the country.
Slowest team in the country. It's I understand the idea of it. A lot of IU fans are looking at Ben McCollum and thinking that's Kurt Cignetti. That is the basketball version of Kurt Cignetti. I think that's incorrect, and I'm going to tell you who the basketball version of Kurt Cignetti is. It's Will Wade. It's Will Wade. I told you we were going to get back to Will Wade. If you want the Kurt Cignetti of basketball to come to Indiana, it's Will Wade. And it's not because of anything that he did at LSU. If you throw his LSU tenure out, the good, the bad, the ugly, he won at Chattanooga. He won at VCU. He's doing a ton of winning at McNeese State, which had done nothing for a decade until he got there and they won 30 games. And he is the type of guy who I think would come in and his personality would be big enough to shield him from a lot of the stuff that goes on around the program. A lot of the stuff that kind of engulfed Woodson and engulfed Archie.
To be
I
honest, like, are IU people just missing a personality?
IU fans are they are starving for success, and it's going to make anyone cranky. I think that that is fair to say. And it doesn't help that two coaches in a row now have clearly not been the right hire, right? So you need someone to come in who is not only a good basketball coach, but someone who has a little bit of over self-confidence, right? I think like swagger is the word that I keep coming back to, but whatever word you want to call it, just ultimate self-belief. Signetti had that, and he came in and said, "We're going to do things this way, and I have a way, and it's going to work." And I think Will Wade would come in and do the same thing. Now, obviously, there are things to get past if you're Indiana with Will Wade, right? There was a whole FBI investigation about this. But if you're looking for
I
the
mean, no one
college basketball
cares,
version,
right? No one,
I,
no one
I
seems
don't
to care.
I don't personally. If you're an IU administrator, is it your job to care? Like, is this something that you're worried could recur? Because if he's not Indiana's coach, there's a good chance that he's Texas's coach in 2 weeks, right? Like, there was a report out today that basically it seems like he was pursued by NC State, and he said, "No, I'm holding out for something bigger."
Well, you
And
touched on coaching at Texas
yeah,
and illegal activities. There's another name out there that
oh,
has been buoyed around, I believe, by no other than another name that we've talked about. So first, Rick Pitino's poster child for IU, Chris Beard.
that to me seems like one coach doing another one a favor. Um, Chris, let me put it to you this way: Chris Beard is not going to be the coach of Indiana basketball.
Okay. You've
I
said
I
this a
can
lot. You've said this from day one.
I have said it from day one, and I continue to believe it. And nothing that has happened in the last month has changed my opinion on that. It does seem like Scott Dolson gave him basically a courtesy phone call, probably to
Okay.
satisfy some booster somewhere that really wanted it to happen. I don't think that that really matters in terms of their search. So that is different from whether I think he should be the Indiana coach. Spoiler, I don't. I would rather him not be. But I just don't think it will happen. I don't think
Okay.
Scott Dolson would do that.
Okay. How about Rick Pitino?
Now we're talking. Now we're talking.
Why? Yeah,
Um,
why get the guy who needs the
like
reference?
here
Take the
his
guy.
here has been the way that I've looked at Rick Pitino. It's also the way that I'm kind of looking at Greg McDermott, which is another name that's been thrown around a lot recently. Which is guys who are a little bit older. And I know Indiana fans are thinking, well, we want someone who's younger. We want someone who's going to be here 10, 15, 20 years, right? And fair enough. But I think if you hire a Pitino or a McDermott, you get 4, 5, 6 good years out of them, maybe. And then you make another run at Dusty, right? I like the way I'm looking at Dusty May to Indiana is, and this is obviously contingent on having success at Michigan. He's had one good year. But the way I'm looking at Dusty May for Indiana is the way Louisville looked at Jeff Brom for a while. Was like they went to
Ooh.
him one time and he said, "No, I've only been here for 2 years at Purdue. There's more for me to do, and I'm gonna say no." And then they waited 4 years and they came back. And now Jeff Brom's been there for 6 years. He's won a division championship. He's done what he came to do at Purdue, and Louisville came again. And Jeff Brom was like, "I'm your guy." And I think that if IU hires an older guy who's going to be around for 5, 6 years, maybe, that can be a bridge to a Dusty May. I think that that is a possibility that it for an older guy. If you're an IU fan and you're worried about an older guy, that would be my response to that.
I it I think it scratches two itches. Patino in particular, because he's proven now at two different places that he's still maybe like pound for pound best college basketball coach.
He's damn good at this.
Yeah,
He is
like he's good.
damn
He
good
turns
at
them
it.
around right away. And if you really, really like Dusty May, you really have to like Dusty May if you're hiring someone with the idea of chasing another
Yeah.
person later.
And I'm not, and by the way, I'm not even saying that that's Scott Dolson will be hiring an older guy to do that, but just that that is a possibility if you are
Right.
hiring an older guy. The silver lining there of not getting a 20-year guy is you're getting another run at Dusty in 5 years.
You hire Rick Pitino, you're probably getting Little Rick. It's gonna happen.
Which I am also not out on. I think Richard Pitino is a good coach. Like what we've seen, like here's the way I'll put it. Ben Johnson is a good coach,
Mm-hmm.
and he has not done nearly what Richard Pitino did in Minnesota.
That's true.
And like Minnesota is a very, very, very hard job. And Richard Pitino was pretty darn good there for a couple of years. They made a couple tournaments. They were never real. I think they had one season where you could call them really bad. But he did fine there. They've been really good at New Mexico. It's obviously one of the best mid-major programs in the country, but he's done nothing to change that. If Indiana goes with some scheme where you take the old man and then the son becomes coach in waiting, I would take that to get 5 years of Rick Pitino. I would. And maybe Scott Dolson is reticent to make that hire because of Rick Pitino's whole thing.
Proclivities?
The whole
proclivities?
Thing. There's a lot that comes along with Rick Pitino, but I also think that it would make Indiana immediately the story of college basketball because first of all, Indiana's, I'm not sure if you as a Purdue guy are aware of this, but Indiana is restarting the series with Kentucky next season.
Mm-hmm.
Getting Rick Pitino and then having him coach Indiana against Kentucky would be one hell of a story. Like it would be the story.
I
of
don't know if
college
they can handle it. Calipari leaves, comes back. That's a lot. That's a lot to ask.
Yeah, man.
That's like if Purdue gets squared up with Tennessee one more time. Like if Purdue beats Tennessee again in the NCAA tournament, fans are not going to do well.
But yeah. So the one name we haven't talked about yet for Indiana, and the one that I am still kind of would be at the top of my board currently. I have him slightly above Wade, just because there's less controversy there. But it's Mick Cronin. And I understand.
I have a different Big Ten coach pulled up.
Really? Is that Collins? Yeah. His name has been bandied about recently. He said he wasn't thinking about it tonight. He gave the non-answer when someone asked him about it. I think that'd be a good hire. I know Indiana fans with Cronin and Collins can go in the bucket of, along with Brownell, of guys that I think would be a really good hire, but Indiana fans would absolutely lose their mind at. Every time I talk about Cronin, it's like, nope, don't want him. Don't, like, fans immediately pop out of the woodwork. No, don't want him. Don't want him.
To be fair, are you excited that every day you get to go to a game and cover a practice that it would be Mick Cronin answering questions for you?
He's gonna say some stuff.
Yeah, he's towards you, at you.
Like, I mean, at UCLA, my impression is that the stuff he said is more directed at the administration and his players and the media.
Yeah, because IU's knocked it out of the park.
Yeah,
with how they've done stuff.
I do think that's part. Well, what Cronin was most upset about last year was the lack of NIL support from UCLA. That's not a problem at Indiana. He's going to get any kind of work chest that he wants. Now, the first time that he calls out a player or players in a post-game press conference, is Indiana's fan base going to melt down? And maybe do they
No,
not?
They're going to love it. Are you kidding me? They grew up on a coach who abused their players.
So
they're gonna get flashbacks to their golden era.
Here's my thing. Here's my question about that. And I thought that for a long time. But Mike Woodson, every time he said something a player needs to be better, fans got on him for calling out his players and making them hate him. Like,
which I don't believe Mike Woodson's doing the job correctly. So no one likes a hypocrite.
So that's my thing would Cronin be given the grace to make the call outs that would he be able
There's no grace in Bloomington, Dylan. I don't know what there's no grace there.
If you win 25 if you win 25 games a year, they're going to give you a whole lot of grace. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, sure, but you earn it first.
Yes,
Mike Woodson had every bit of grace possible, and how'd that turn out?
Yeah, well, so that's my thing is that it turned for him so quickly. I think people were pretty much they would have given Mike Woodson a pretty solid thumbs up after his second year, right? Obviously, they didn't like the way it ended with the game against Miami, but that's the team that went to the Final Four. You get it, right? Um, and I think the grace ended so quickly with that. It was the middle of his second year, and suddenly they're not in the tournament, and it's like, okay, this is year three, we got to get rid of him right now. Part of that was because they saw Dusty on the horizon. It was like, all right, this is back quarterback syndrome. But if you get a guy in there like a Cronin who's won, he's been to this is going to be his 13th NCAA tournament in 15 years, I believe. And one of the years they quote unquote missed was the COVID year. So if you get a guy in there who's done that and been to the Final Four and coached a blue blood, do you at least give him a couple of years before you start getting on him for every little thing he says? And I do wonder about because like it seems like the answer is no, because a lot of guys, when I've said that, have mentioned his personalities. I don't think it would mesh with IU. What does that mean? Like
I'm a
they're
little
like
more worried about Cronin being unwilling to deal with
he's
Bloomington people.
fair enough, right? I think he's unhappy at UCLA. It seems to me from everything
I think
I
he's
understand.
unhappy with existence.
Well, fair enough. But I think the Midwest suits his personality a little bit better than California might. So I am still
Iowa?
holding out. Yeah. Oh boy, if Fran leaves and Mick Cronin is the hire at Iowa, I would laugh pretty hard. But I do think that that is the one that if you said, all right, Dylan, I can wave a magic wand and you can get anyone who is in the ballpark of realistic, all the names that have been bandied about, with Otzelberger not being on the list because he's apparently out. I would pick Cronin. I understand a lot of people
Really?
disagree with that. I would.
It's a terrible
Um,
waste of a magic wand, first of all. It doesn't
um,
benefit you at all.
this is a magic wand with a lot of caveats on
Okay.
it.
Okay.
But
Live and
I
expect.
would pick Cronin. I like you could convince me
He's
of
your
the
golden
way
goose.
like uh, if you're telling me that Stevens and May and Otzelberger and Drew are all if you're telling me those four guys are no's, which seems to be the case right now, then yes, I would take Cronin over the field in that case.
I get it. I think he is absolutely a good basketball coach. Um, I feel like it's too much prickly on prickly there. And
Maybe that can
I,
make sweet music. It could be sweet music.
it's possible. It's gotten to the point now where it's really hard for me to envision like a really good IU program, which is weird.
They were a 4 seed 3 years or 2 years ago now. And it, Assembly Hall was rocking, man. Like that season they hosted North Carolina, who was preseason number one. And they lost a game by that point, so they weren't number one anymore. But they hosted North Carolina. Indiana defended the hell out of the ball for 40 minutes, and those fans did not sit down for a single minute, and it was packed to the gills. If there is even a like a nod toward getting to that level of basketball on a consistent basis, it really is one of the best fan bases in the country, and they will show up if it seems like they're getting back to where they were. The problem was Archie never even gave them a semblance of we might be back because they were so bad so early. And Woodson, it was never going to be a permanent thing, right? It always seemed like a stopgap. Even when they beat Purdue and Purdue was number one, it always seemed like a little bit of a stopgap. And so there needs to be a coach who is going to really just get the floor back to 22 wins, right? That is what IU needs to be looking for in this hire. I think Cronin gets you there, and I think that if they do, the next time Indiana is a 6 seed in the NCAA tournament, it's going to be electric in Assembly Hall, and then you build from there, right? That is the way I'm looking at it. Is that those fans will show up and be loud when that team is really good.
Yeah. I, I still have a hard time picturing it, but it's possible. He'll be able to be on his Eastern Standard Time Zone. I know that'll
That's
make him
right.
happy.
His
Uh, that's probably enough for now on
Sure.
what will be an endlessly fascinating search through the drivel of why it's the worst time. There's like so much basketball going on right now that like
Yeah.
this all happening in the background, like
I
it's
think
good and bad.
I think that's the way Scott Dolson likes it. It's not the way the fan base likes it because they're hungry for information, but there's a
Yeah,
season happening right
yeah,
right out here, over here.
yep. And that season will continue tomorrow with IU playing at noon, Purdue finishing it off at 9. Both teams playing for quite a bit. IU Oregon might be the best game of the day.
It wouldn't surprise me. I like the 8-9 game on the second day is usually pretty good. IU played in the 8-9 game a couple of years ago against Hunter Dickinson in Michigan. Game went to that they won that game despite trailing by 17 in the second half. So I would expect it was a pretty good game when they played in Eugene a couple like last week. I would expect a pretty good game here. Those are two teams that Oregon plays really, really hard. Indiana is playing hard right now, and they're going to be a pretty desperate team going out there.
Yep. So make sure to check all of Dylan's stuff. Tell them where they can find you, Dylan.
That is journalgazette.net. I'll have plenty of stuff. I'm going to actually put together probably tomorrow afternoon sometime a revised IU list of okay, here's who's realistic at this point for the coaching search, and then obviously covering all IU and Purdue in the Big Ten tournament. So
Yep.
find it there, journalgazette.net.
Yep. Dylan will be working hard from Indy most of the week. I'm Casey Bartley with Boiler Upload Rivals. I will also be in Indy for probably at least 2 games. I would imagine Purdue's going to handle. It looks like USC right now. They're up about 10 at half. But yep, this has been the State of the Rivalry. Appreciate you watching. Do the whole like, subscribe, comment thing. Let us know who you think IU should hire. Um, Purdue people in particular answer and make me laugh. Peace.